All right, everyone, welcome to the Ask Me Anything on Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. I'm your host, James O'Neill. I'm the owner of Raven. Eileen on my team is going to be with us here today. Couple rules for the road, just so everybody understands how this is going to work. If everybody wouldn't mind leaving themselves on mute while I'm giving the presentation, I basically what happened was everybody submitted their questions online. I took those questions, I organized them by theme, and then took the time to kind of lay those out in kind of a presentation format so we can hit the most amount of questions that we possibly can. We're looking to go for about an hour today, depending on how the time looks. If we have time at the end, we're going to take questions. If not, we'll be releasing stuff on LinkedIn and Facebook and a couple other social media outlets to kind of answer any of the questions that we weren't able to get to in this actual Ask Me Anything. In terms of the questions that we selected, I tried to pick ones that would benefit the entire group and ones that were repetitive that a lot of people were asking over and over and over. While I'm talking, if any questions pop up, if you wouldn't mind, drop them into the chat. Eileen's actually going to be looking at those. She may be interrupting me throughout to kind of ask questions that you guys are posing. Like I said, if we don't get to them during the time that we're spending here today, like I said, I'll be recording videos afterwards to get those out. We also are going to be doing this on a monthly basis. So if we don't get to a question today, it will likely make the next Ask Me Anything. So on that note, let's get started. Look, the number one goal for today is perspective and clarity. So like I said, everyone took the time to submit questions, and a lot of the questions were really thoughtful. But here's basically what the themes of the questions are. A lot of folks are looking at what are the industry trends that we're seeing internally at Raven through our own clients, through our recruiter connections, to the information that we're gathering. Folks really want to know what's going to make them stick out, what's going to trigger an interview, especially right now with all the competitive minimums changing and everything in the landscape. It's really hard for a lot of folks to figure out, are they competitive? Are they not competitive? What do they need to do to make themselves competitive? Should they be staying where they're at, or should they be taking a risk and going someplace else? A lot of folks had questions on how to optimize their resumes and their applications. Number of folks have interviews coming up. Congratulations. So looking for what types of questions are being asked, and then background issues, check ride failures, terminations, DUIs. So this is the list of questions that we're really going to be going through today during, like I said, during our time for this Ask Me Anything. If you guys stay to the end, I'm going to have a bunch of resources that you guys can go to that are free to stay up to date on these topics that we're talking about. Throughout this, like I said, as I'm sharing the information, I'll be telling you guys where we're getting this information from, how we're collecting it. But also, look, I want you guys to be able to find this on a day-to-day basis from the comfort of your own iPhone, so that you, when you're sitting down with yourself or you're sitting down with your family and you're trying to make decisions on what path you should or shouldn't take, I want to make sure it's an informed decision. I want you to have as much data and facts as possible to drive your decisions. So at the end of the day, yes, there's going to be a little bit of risk no matter what you do, but we want it to be intelligent and thoughtful risk, not just jumping off a cliff, hoping everything works itself out. So a lot of you are probably already aware the hiring trends, believe it or not, are actually starting to stabilize. Depending on what sources you look at, the hiring is down roughly about 25 to 30% from what it was last year. I'm going to show you a chart here in a little bit that shows you graphically what the hiring trends are looking like. I know 25 to 30% sounds really, really scary, especially because there's probably a lot of you that have been submitting resumes and submitting applications, and maybe you haven't been getting phone calls. But the reality is the hiring is still well above what historical norms are, but things are taking a longer period of time than they were over the past 12 to 24 months. They're still moving way faster than they have historically, but they're slower than they have been over the past 12 to 24 months. Now, I get it, right? If you're in a situation where you're looking for a job, you don't really necessarily care what historical stats look like. You care, hey, what's going on right now? And the problem is, because of how fast everything's moved in the past 12 to 24 months, folks think they're doing something wrong because things are taking a little bit longer, when a lot of times that's not the case. They're having to be a little bit more patient. Training failures across the industry are really, really high. And this is going to play a lot into what makes you competitive and how do you make yourself stand out and how do you make yourself stick out. But man, training failures are way higher than we would like to see them. A lot of this, there's a lot of factors that are creating this. If you think about it, there's a massive set of retirements that's going on right now. So there's a bit of a brain drain of really experienced people leaving the industry. Those folks leaving the industry has made opportunities for some of the more experienced check airmen and instructors to make that jump up to the next level, right? So you have a lot of folks that are new stepping into these check airmen or instructor roles, and they're being asked to do double, triple the load of what they were before. So there's a lot of stress and pressure on the training system. And what that means is, if any of you guys have been through a major training program recently, you may notice it doesn't really necessarily always feel like you're getting training as much as it's like they expected you to show up already knowing what you're doing, and they're there just to check your progress. And so that's kind of some of the consistencies that we're seeing right now. And if folks don't know what to expect going into the training programs, which a lot of them don't, if you haven't been through one before, think about if you're a military pilot transitioning into civilian aviation, maybe you're a 1,500-hour CFI going to your first regional. Look, it's tough. You don't know what to expect. And so what happens is folks go into training and they're focusing everywhere instead of on what they need to be in that moment. Terminations are actually up as well. And the thing that has been fairly shocking to me is it's not just folks that are on probation. So yes, look, there is a certain subset of terminations that are coming from folks getting into training and they're not progressing. Maybe they didn't fail a specific check ride, but the instructor isn't comfortable signing them off. Maybe folks have gone through an LOE or an MV and they failed it once or twice, and so they're being forced to resign. But I mean, I've had 1 or 2 people per week for the past 6 or 8 weeks reach out. Legacy airlines, regional airlines. I've had captains, I've had check airmen that are either being asked to resign or being terminated. And so some of them are, look, the person did something where if you were to talk to them, they would go, look, man, I messed up, I shouldn't have done that. And they got let go as a result. There's a number of things where folks aren't reading the stress of the situation that they're in correctly. And there's conflict that's being created between other crew members, could be a passenger or a customer, and they just don't have the awareness or the skill set to handle it in the moment, and it escalates out of control. So those are some things that you definitely want to pay attention to as you're going through LinkedIn, as you're going through Facebook, so on and so forth. New training contracts are coming out. Some of you guys may have read the most recent newsletter that we had on this Saturday talking about some training contracts. And the training contract game is really interesting right now because it's starting to change. The new way that these companies are structuring these training contracts is different than how any company has done it in the past 25, 30 years of aviation. And so it's creating a lot of stress for folks because they're signing on to what could amount to be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-year commitment to a company, depending on how the contract is structured. And they don't necessarily understand, hey, what am I actually committing to here? And what is the cost of not meeting that commitment? And so really what this is leading to is pilots being uneasy with a lot of this change. And so that's really what we're going to want to talk about here today. So folks always ask, look, how do we know the information that we do? And I really wish I had a one-stop shop source. So look, we've been in the business for over 15 years. We worked with over 4,000 plus clients. One of the deals that we make with every single person that comes on to work with us as a client, and there's a number of folks that are on this call with us today that are clients, is, look, we make a commitment to you to support you, to get you the information, to be there when you need it, but we ask the same in return. It's our clients that are sharing, hey, I'm in ground school, let me tell you who's in class with me. Let me tell you what the failure trends are. Let me tell you what the issues with the instructors are. Let me tell you what's going on with IOE. A lot of the information that we get is from folks like you that are kind enough to share it with us, right? And the advantage that we have is we get to take that information that you're sharing with us and dump gasoline on it and share it with a much larger audience. So the first thing is I want to say thank you to all the folks that reach out on LinkedIn, that comment on the post, that comment on Facebook, that send us the emails with the information. We use it for these presentations. Eileen spends dozens of hours per month reaching out to the folks in the different recruiting departments. And it's at all levels. It's all the way up to the heads of hiring, all the way down to the folks that are actually doing the recruiting and the job fairs. So there's a lot of information that we get from recruiters in terms of what are people doing that's making them stick out in a good way. What are things that folks are doing that are making them stick out in a bad way? So when you guys have comments in the chat that are related to a lot of the recruiting, what the recruiters are saying, what are they feeling, you're going to notice Eileen's going to be stepping in to kind of share some of that information because she's a rock star when it comes to that. The other thing is, look, we've been through these hiring cycles before, right? I myself have been through September 11th, the 2008 financial crisis, age 65. We've got coronavirus, right? So this is not the first cycle that we've been through. We've seen the ups, we've seen the downs. The cool thing is aviation's not that creative of an industry. So when things go bad and things go well, they kind of go to these old ways of doing things that are really reliable. And so what that really means is there's no problem we really haven't seen before. For myself, I've done about 15,000 hours of one-on-one coaching with clients. I've been an airline pilot myself. I've been a corporate pilot. I've been a management pilot. I was an FAA inspector. I used to be on the event review committee for ASAP for JetBlue. I did the 767 certification for Atlas, and I currently fly for Flight Check, certifying the ILS and VOR approaches. And then I've done a lot of training with military pilots as well, as they've kind of transitioned with us on the government side. So you're going to notice a lot of the feedback or a lot of the perspective that I'm sharing. It's not just from what are we hearing from clients, but it's a lot of my own personal experience of things that have worked for me and things that really haven't worked for me that I'll be sharing as we're going through these questions. Okay, so I don't know if any of you guys are signed up for the FAPA Pilot Hiring Bulletin, but there are really two sources every month that you can go to get the data that you need to make decisions. One is the Raven newsletter. We put ours out every Saturday. I'm going to have a link at the end of this presentation for you guys to register for that. The second is FAPA. FAPA does a really good job of doing an industry synopsis on a monthly basis of what's going on hiring wise. And so this is a chart from them. I believe this was created by Tim Gank over there. Really great guy, really, really knowledgeable. But look, these are the two things that folks need to be looking at data-wise right now if you really want to understand what's going on in the industry and why. These are the TSA passenger numbers. Now, I'm sure everybody kind of remembers what this was, right? The coronavirus, right? But 2019 was a historical travel year. Eileen used to run one of the largest travel programs in the US, 255,000 travelers, right? And so when I would listen to her talk about, hey, what was going on in 2019, these were travel numbers that nobody had ever seen before, right? This is why it was gangbusters coming into coronavirus. Obviously, Corona had a little bit of a dip there, right? We all remember that. But if you notice today, the demand is right back roughly where it was in 2019. This is really an exciting thing because historically, when we had slowdowns in hiring, when we had folks waiting to get interviews, folks couldn't get in the door, it's because demand dropped. People didn't want to fly. September 11th, people did not want to get on airplanes. 2008, people couldn't afford to get on airplanes. Coronavirus, people didn't want to get on airplanes, which meant if you were out of work as a pilot, there was no place to find a job. Right now, the demand is high. The issue is, as you all know, is aircraft availability for Boeings and Airbuses. Now, the reason why this is exciting is because the demand is high, corporate companies, think about NetJets, FlexJet, companies like that, right? But airlines, United, Delta, and American, there's people that want to get on their airplanes. And if they can't find a Boeing or an Airbus, guess what? They're going to put them on an Embraer or a CRJ, right? And so that's why a lot of you folks are starting to see Envoy, SkyWest, Republic, the interviews are starting to pick back up. United, Delta, American are still hiring, right? The numbers, like I said, those are about 25, 30% off of where they were, but they're still hiring. The hiring hasn't stopped. And oh, by the way, when they get their hands on Airbuses and when they get their hands on Boeings, they're going to be putting more pilots into seats as a result of that. That's why we're following really closely when you hear those announcements over how many airplanes or how many Airbuses is United bringing out on lease, right? Where is Delta finding airplanes? Where is American finding airplanes? Because every one of those airplanes that comes onto property, that's 5, 10, 15 pilot jobs. And that's good news. Here's one of the most recent charts that came out from FAPA, and this goes all the way back to 1990, and you can see the hiring trends. And you can notice just prior to September 11th, about 5,000 pilots, massive drop off, right? Come in, we kind of recover in 2004. We don't get back to that 2000 number, but guess what? We get to 3,000 pilots. Boom, we hit the 2008 financial crisis, right? Okay, we do this massive climb all the way back up to 5,000 pilots. That's in that 2019 timeframe. Boom, we have coronavirus. But look at this hiring that came out of coronavirus. This is what people don't understand about the past 24 months. Hiring like this has never happened. 13,000 pilots hired per year. When you take a look at a 25% drop off, you're still 7, 8, 9,000 pilots, which is still above all the way back to 1990, the highest number. So yes, folks are having to wait, but this is now a game of, do you understand how to compete, not crisis over, am I going to find a job? Okay, so a couple things to be aware of. And I know for some of you, you are targeting majors, but for a lot of you, you're not targeting a major airline right now. Like I said, you might be that 1,500-hour CFI, you might be that rotary transition pilot. But no matter where you're applying in the industry, right? I don't care if you're applying to United, Delta, American. I don't care if you're going to NetJets or FlexJet, or if you're going to one of the regionals. Really, the hiring is dictated by what happens at United, Delta, and American. Because as they hire more pilots, they pull more people out of the military, they pull more people up from the regionals, they pull more people out of corporate, which guess what? Rising tide raises all ships. That creates all those opportunities for those folks coming into the industry, right? Because we've had this pullback from the majors, right? And the regionals have had trouble finding direct entry captains. That's why you have rotary transition pilots. That's why you have 1,500-hour CFI sitting around right now going, I can't get a phone call. What's going on? Not a demand issue. It's now they're trying to pick back up and get those direct entry captains so that they can get those FOs into seats. Americans' retirements are peaking in 2025 at roughly around 950. United's retirements start increasing in 2025 and they peak in 2028 at about 730. Right now, for folks that are worried about getting hired, this is a crisis in expectation. It is not a hiring crisis, right? The expectation has been set 13,000 pilots a year for the past 24 months. So that's the expectation that people are coming into. And now only 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 pilots are getting hired. And so folks are having to wait and they're thinking, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong, when that's not the case. It's just taking longer. Okay, so now what I want to do, now that I've given you kind of a brief overview of what's going on in the industry and why things are happening the way they're happening, let's start getting to the questions that you guys answered. All right, so the first set of questions that we got are industry trend questions. So how will a major throttling applicants from their own regionals affect the application process? Will they sit on your application, or will they still complete the interview process? And then kind of dovetailed off that, what's going the current pulse at NetJets, SkyWest, and Republic, right? Folks are starting to look at those places because they're seeing the hiring pick up, right? And they're saying, hey, look, what do I need to be looking at hiring trends? So look, are the majors throttling applicants from their own regionals? Absolutely. You can see it, right? Get on LinkedIn, find any new hire first officer and ask them how many. On LinkedIn, it'll tell you, hey, congratulations, I just started with American Airlines. Congratulations, I just started with the first officer with Delta Airlines or United Airlines. Reach out to the person, say, congratulations. Would you be willing to share how many people were in your class and where they came from? And you're going to notice some really interesting trends on who the airlines are hiring right now. If you're a major airline, if you're a legacy airline, and the demand is really, really high, passengers want to get on your jets, right? And you have regional jets that are sitting in storage. Remember, was a year or two ago, the regionals basically parked about 500 jets because they didn't have enough direct entry captains, because all those guys were getting pulled up to the majors, right? So now you're a major airline. You have people that want to get on your airplanes. You can't get Boeings and Airbuses. You have regional jets sitting in a parking garage somewhere, and you need to pull those things out of the desert. You need direct entry captains to do that. And they're having a lot of trouble. Regionals are having a lot of trouble finding people that meet those minimum qualifications to be those direct entry captains. So every captain that United, Delta, or American pulls out of a regional potentially keeps one of their regional jets on the ground and keeps those passengers that want to get on their jets not buying tickets from them. Every check airman they hire from a regional, guess what? That slows down how quickly they can get people trained and qualified to be direct entry captains, right? So the majors are having to make a very difficult decision right now on how many of our most experienced pilots do we take, And how many do we sit where they're at so we can stabilize our route structure and capture as much of that revenue as we possibly can? So as the majors start throttling those applicants, you start seeing pilots looking, do I want to go to NetJets? Do I want to go to a non-wholly owned regional, right? Folks are starting to try and get creative, but a lot of those options have been pulled off the table. Southwest 737 operator, right? They're not hiring right now. Spirit going through furloughs, Aero going through furloughs, Frontier. Eileen, how long have we had folks? We've had folks that got hired in October, November that are still waiting on class dates with Frontier, right?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, people have gotten their CJOs back in the September, October, November timeframe, and maybe they'll have a July class date. And we just had
Right.
somebody else that was told originally it was supposed to be end of the year, and they got told it could be another 9 to 12 months from right now.
We have folks getting hired by Alaska, 737s, CJO in October, November timeframe. They're hoping they might get a class date this year. So a lot of those opportunities that people had to skip a regional and go someplace else, those opportunities aren't gone, but there are far less of them. So guess what? When you show up to a NetJets, I can't tell you how many times NetJets does a phone screen up front. Can't tell you how many times we have clients going into a phone screen and the recruiter's looking at their resume and they're going, do you actually really want to work here? Or are you here just because you think it's your only shot to skip a regional? And if you don't have a good answer for that, you take the wrong pause at the wrong time, and that $130,000 to $150,000 a year job, that's boom, off the table, right? So folks, when they're showing up to these interviews, right, showing up to a regional airline, showing up to a NetJets, where 6-9 months ago, you could kind of basically walk in the door and, if there was a mirror in front of your face and it got foggy, they were going to offer you a conditional job offer. The rejection rates that we're seeing are through the roof at these companies right now on the interviews, right? Folks going, hey man, I've gone into 3 interviews and I got a rejection, and then they're calling out, reaching out for interview prep because their mind is stuck back to 6 to 9 months ago where these weren't necessarily as competitive jobs. And now with a new contract at NetJets, right? With the opportunity to put you into the right seat of regional and give you a reasonably quick upgrade, these regionals and these corporate operators like NetJets understand, look, they're a valuable job because they're getting you more qualified, more competitive for a legacy airline faster. So that's the big trend that we're seeing right now is these options are still there, but you are having to compete for these jobs significantly harder than you were in the past. And we're going to get to kind of some of the interview related questions on what they're asking so you can see kind of what are you needing to do to compete. Okay, so with that, now folks are asking, okay, now that my options are cut down, right? Now that I have fewer places that I can go to, right? How do I make myself stick out? How can I trigger an interview? What are the legacy carriers looking for in a competitive applicant besides flight time? And by the way, you can swap legacy carriers for regional carriers, corporate carriers. Other than, like, don't get me wrong, flight time is an important component, but there are other things that these operators are looking for outside of flight time because remember that termination thing I talked about before? Remember that check ride failure thing I talked about before? They're noticing trends of different characteristics that people need to be bringing to the table that tell them, hey, will this person be successful in the cockpit here or not? How much credit do the majors really give to Part 91 or 135 time if you're flying something burning Jet A? And what will set your resume apart from others in this competitive hiring environment? So just to give you guys some context in terms of where this information is coming from. So for the clients that reach out to us, we write their resume and we fill their applications out for them, right? We do the whole thing for them. Now, what that does for us is gives us a unique perspective because we are seeing hundreds of applications coming through per month that we're filling out for people, hundreds of resumes that we are physically writing for people. Right, and each one of those resumes that we write for someone, each one of those applications that we fill out for someone, A resume, we're spending an hour to 2 hours in one-on-one interviews with people, asking them questions about their background and finding the inside the cockpit and outside the cockpit skills that are going to make them stick out. Every application that we fill out for someone, we're spending 7 to 10 hours with a client between going through their paperwork, reading through it line by line, looking for errors, going through the application, through all the information they put in already, finding the errors and fixing that, filling in the gaps of information they left out there, doing one-on-one screen shares with them, showing them everything we've done, asking them additional follow-up questions. And the reason why that's important is we're constantly pulling that data in and tracking that so that we can see what is triggering an interview, what is forcing someone to sit on the bench and wait. And as we pull that information in, the next person's resume we write, the next person's application we fill out, we're refining the questions we're asking, we're refining the information we're pulling out of your background so that we're targeting information on that application, on that resume that makes you stick out. So the easiest way to understand this is to actually start with the application. And so if you think about it, there are 3 different types of information that you can put into an application. Okay, so the first is what we call fillable information. So if you think about it, when it says, what is your passport number? And you type that in, that's fillable information. When it asks, what was your GPA? And you type that in, that's fillable information, okay? That is information that can be keyword searched, but is very difficult for a computer to go through and score. That is when your application or your resume is sitting in front of a live human being. They're physically reading it. They're physically connecting the dots. They're putting the pieces together and focusing on how does that make us a good fit here. And really, when we take a look at fillable information, that's where we want to focus on the soft skills. That's where we want to tie the written content like a duty or description or educational background. That's where we want to marry that up with the core values of the company. What does the company screen for when they're interviewing? Okay. The second type of information that is in the application is what's called a radio button. So think about it, ask, have you ever been a chief pilot? Yes or no, click a box, right? Have you ever been a check airman? Yes or no, click a box, right? Okay, that information gives you all the insight you need to understand what are the airlines looking for. That information is very easy for a computer algorithm to go through and score, right? I can take a question like, have you ever been a chief pilot? And I can put 10 points on every time you click a yes button to that. Now, the big mistake that people make with applications is they think there are things that can add points and things that can remove points from your application. That's not really 100% true. It's really only things that can add. So if you think about that question, have you ever been a chief pilot? If you click yes, it adds, I'm making up this number, it's different by carrier, right? But it adds 10 points to your score. When you click no, it doesn't subtract 10 points to your score, it just doesn't add it, if that makes sense. So when we take a look at that those radio button information, yeah, that tells you what is going to make you more competitive. But the problem is there's one chief pilot per company, right? Okay, yeah, there's more than one check airman, but 5%, 10% of the population, 3% of the population is check airmen. It's not exactly easy to turn to somebody and say, yeah, just go become a chief pilot. Just go become a check airman, right? Go upgrade to captain, get PIC time. And so when we're going through the application and we're asking clients those questions, and this is really where the mentorship and the coaching of what we do, the strategy comes into play while we're doing those resumes and applications is, guess what? If you can't get it inside the airline, that's where the volunteer experience and the outside the company and outside the cockpit and the union experience comes in, right? If I can't become a chief pilot, right? I can't become a check airman. Can I take a leadership position someplace else outside the airline, right? Or outside your Part 91 flight department or outside your Part 135 flight department? And if you take a look at those radio buttons, you can start to take a look at what types of outside the cockpit experience do I want to get. And so we spend a lot of time with people focusing on, okay, do you want to target this inside your company? Okay, you don't have experience. How do you target that outside your company? After we have that, the last type of information is drop-down information, right? So you think about all the different places on an application where you can select drop-down information, which is kind of like a different version of a radio button. Very easy to score for the airline, right? So if you start by going through the application of the airlines that you want to work for, skip the fillable information, skip the drop-down information, and just look at the radio buttons and start to write down, what things do I have? What things do I not have? What things could I start to target inside my company? And what of those things could I very closely mirror outside of my company? Okay, yes, turbine PIC time is becoming more valuable. Yes, turbine time is becoming more valuable. Yes, lower amounts of check ride failures, terminations, DUIs, arrests, accidents, incidents are becoming more valuable. Yes, check airmen are becoming more valuable. Depends on how you look at it, but you can make an argument that going to a NetJets, where when you get there, depending on the fleet you choose, unlike a lot of the regionals, you're not going to sit waiting for IOE for a really long period of time. So you're going to start building that jet time faster, right? As you start building that jet time faster, now you're looking at a 12 to 18 month upgrade opportunity. Now you're building that turbine PIC time faster. A lot of people don't realize that when you go to a place like a NetJets, their training program is an AQP training program. It is certified under FAR Part 121. It's 121 subpart N, subpart O. So now when you go to a large 135 operator like this, you're meeting the 121 standard when you come out of that training. Versus when you're taking a look at a regional, yeah, okay, congratulations, you're building 121 time. Yes, congratulations, you're building jet time, but how fast? And that's why when folks reach out to us and we're doing those resumes for them and we're doing the applications, that's a lot of the mentorship that we're talking about. Remember, most people are targeting multiple companies. And so we're trying to help them figure out, okay, what should be your number one? What should be your number two? What should be your number three? Based on what your goals are on how fast you want to progress. If you have a family versus don't have a family, that's going to be a different situation. If you're in debt from student loans, you need to pay that off quicker. That's going to be a different situation. The last thing you want to be doing is in a boatload of debt, commuting to reserve at a base where you're going to fly 20 hours a month and not make over guarantee. These are the things that we're guiding people through right now in terms of how do we make them competitive. And it is not a one size fits all. There is a lot of strategy that we put into this with people to help them make decisions that are very specific for them and very specific for their family and very specific for what they want to achieve in what time frame. Okay, so this is a great example of this, right? So PC-12 135 PIC with a class next month for upgrade to PIC in a mid-sized jet just crossed 1,000 hours PC-12 PIC time. Congratulations, brother. And historically have prioritized growth within a company, newly an instructor pilot and check airman, on path to assistant chief pilot, over seeking larger turbojet right seat 135 or any regional low-cost opportunities. Is my goal maximizing marketability to legacy airlines? What would you prioritize in this hiring climate? So now let's take this question and let's go back to what we just talked about those radio buttons. Guess what? Yes, there's a radio button for instructor pilot. There's a radio button for check airman. There's a radio button for assistant chief pilot, right? Highly valuable. That's what that tells you. Highly, highly, highly valuable skill sets and resume building opportunities. Now, the PC-12, the 1,000 hours of PC-12 PIC time is great, but you'll notice a lot of the majors are looking at twin engine turbine time. So the idea of going up to PIC into a mid-sized jet, once again, great jump. That's gonna make him more competitive. Now, if you think about it, when we get into the difference between PIC on a mid-sized jet over a larger turbojet right seat, right now, I would prioritize the PIC time over the right seat time in a larger airplane. As long as that PIC time is multi-engine, I would prioritize the PIC time right now over the larger turbojet right seat, unless for some reason you need to build total time quicker, right? But right now, PIC time is king. Instructor pilot, check airman, assistant chief pilot, great experiences that the airlines understand, easy to score on that application, makes you stand out. Okay, should I just pay for my CTP course, my ATP written, and my ATP license? Is there any added value in getting your ATP in a 320 type via ATP jets without 121 time? How does Raven expect the FTC's newest non-compete clause, aka ban, to shape these airline training contracts moving forward? And with airline hiring slowing down, will hiring come back to the levels like we saw over the last few years once airplane deliveries get back on schedule? While we're waiting for hiring to come back, should we push ourselves to gain PIC hours, or should we take quality of life? What's your opinion? Okay, so I'm going to deal with the second question first because that leads into the first question. Okay, so will we see hiring levels coming back to like we saw over the last few years? So look, my crystal ball is in the shop, right? So I do apologize. We're going to have to kind of make this up a little bit. But assuming nobody flies an airplane into a building, assuming nobody tries to destroy the economy with very creative mortgage solutions, and assuming nobody takes their pet bat and puts it in a cage with their pet ferret, yes, it looks like hiring is about to pick back up. What is the limitation on that hiring? Okay, so we know the Boeing debacle. Everyone knows what's going on there. The other side of this that a lot of people aren't aware of is Airbus. If you research the GTF, Golf Tango Fox, the geared turbofan engines, there's some manufacturing defaults in those engines. We're not going to know till the summer, end of summer, what impact that's going to have on different airlines. A lot of these airlines are having to take their airplanes offline, send them in for inspections, and find out, hey, look, am I going to have to pull airplanes out of the mix, or am I going to be able to keep them offline? If those airplanes come down, we don't know how long the fix takes on these Airbuses. It depends on how the supply chain goes. It depends on how many mechanics they have available, right? So this is why, and I'm going to show you a quote from a recruiter that responded to one of my LinkedIn posts here the last few weeks. This is murder on the recruiters right now. They're trying to predict, right? You got to remember, they've got to hire people 3 to 6 months ahead of when they need them. And they don't even know what their aircraft deliveries are going to look like, right? So trust me, the recruiters aren't liking this any more than you are. This is not fun for anybody right now, right? The airlines have a product that people are banging down the door to purchase. People want to get on airlines. They want to get on airplanes right now. They want to go on vacation. And the airlines are going, sorry, we can't get the airplanes. You own the most popular hamburger store in the 3-state area and you ran out of buns. Not good, right? So when these slowdowns happen, people tend to get demoralized. Right? When things are going well, people tend to think they're going to go well forever. They're never going to get bad. And when things are going bad, people tend to think things are going to continue to get bad. They're never going to get good ever again. I hate to break it to you. All good things come to an end, but so do all bad things, right? This is just a wave, right? We're just surfing right now, and we're in a wave, all right? What we really want to prioritize is in this lull, in this downtime, what type of experience can I gain so that when the trend reverses, when that hiring picks back up to where it was, I'm in a spot where I'm a competitive candidate. I'll give you a really good example. I started my instrument training 3 months before September 11th, right? September 11th happens and the entire industry basically shuts down. I made the decision to accelerate my flight training and getting my bachelor's degree. I did a 4-year bachelor's degree in 2.5 years. And I went from getting my private, from finishing my private all the way through flight instructor MEI in 12 months. And every one of my buddies went, "You're an idiot. Why are you doing that?" Because I knew it was going to recover. Now, when it comes to economic things, if you take a look at the trends, if you take a look at the 2008 financial crisis, take a look at September 11th, take a look at Gulf War I, take a look at the 1987 stock market crisis, 3 to 4 years. Closer to 3 is normally what it is. September 11th happened, August 2024, the passenger demand had recovered, right? So 3 years is roughly that lull you have historically. Do I think this is going to take 3 years? I have no friggin' clue. Honestly, no clue. Like I said, the magic 8 balls in the shop. None of us knew Boeing was going to start blowing doors off airplanes at the beginning of the year. Nobody knew that Airbus was going to have a production issue with their airplanes. There are things that no matter how big of an expert you are, no matter how much data you have, no matter how many people you know, there are unknown unknowns, right? But do I think within 2 to 3 years, this is going to be pretty stable? Right now, all indications say yes. So in that 2 to 3 year time, what do you want to do to get yourself in that most competitive spot? Because in 2 to 3 years, guess what? Those competitive minimums start to drop again. So now we start taking a look at, okay, maybe I don't want to fly 100 hours a month, but maybe I want to fly 70 versus 30. Maybe I do want to volunteer for that union committee. Maybe I do want to put myself on a track to become a ground school instructor. Maybe I do want to put myself on a track to become a simulator instructor. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it can happen 12 months from now. And the reality of it is, maybe you do just want to take the quality of life. But if you choose the quality of life, right, when everybody else is running really, really hard, just understand that when it recovers, you will be behind them, and that's okay. That's not a problem. It's not a bad thing. We just want to make sure that you understand when you prioritize skill advancement versus quality of life, that you know what to get, you know what to expect out of that. Now, when it comes to the CTP course, the ATP written and the ATP license, my personal opinion, go back to the radio button concept on those applications, right? My personal opinion, getting the ATP written, getting the CTP course out of the way makes you a significantly more valuable candidate, especially because of the training failures and the check ride failures that are going on. It's a very easy thing that a regional can look at. It's a very easy thing that a NetJets can look at, right? Where they can say, hey, this person, they spent the money, they did the investment, they spent the time, right? This is somebody that's motivated. Eileen, would you agree with that based on the conversation you're having with the recruiters, or do you have a different opinion than the one that I'm sharing?
No, I think the only thing that I would say, and apologies, I don't want to jump ahead, is when we get to ATP versus ATP with type. That seems to be the big question. I'm not a personal fan of type without time. I think all you've proven is you can pass a check ride, but that ATP is huge. Nobody cares what you have it in, right? It's just that you have it. So time without type gets a little dicey.
So I think you bring up a really good point, and we get this question a lot with the ATP jet. So I want to give a couple of caveats before we kind of jump into some of those details. And I apologize for the coughing. So the first is, I always want to be sensitive that everybody has a different financial situation over what they can afford, right? Affording to invest in a CTP course or an ATP written, that's a lot of money, right? And over the past couple of years, when the regionals have been paying for that, pilots subtracted out that, what's it, like $8,000 or $9,000 for the CTP course plus hotels and everything. So it's probably about what, $10,000 altogether.
ATP CTP course is about $5,000, and then yeah, you would have to add in about a week's worth of hotels if it's not already,
And
then
airfare and meals.
airfare, meals, and then if there's costs associated for the written and then the practical on top of it if you were going all the way.
So you're between $7,000 and let's call it $10,000, right? I want to be sensitive to that there's a lot of people that don't have 7 to 10,000, right? So when they're making that decision to make that investment, that's why when we're going through your resume, when we're writing that for you, when we're going through your application and we're taking a look at all the other things and we're explaining to you what is and isn't making you competitive, we can help you make an informed decision over how much more competitive is that going to make you. Because that's really the deal, right? If I told you go spend $10,000 or $7,000 on a CTP or an ATP course, and it's going to get you an $80,000 a year job or a $100,000 a year job in 2 weeks, that's a really easy decision to make, right? But if there's a risk, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how long you're going to have to wait. So when we're filling out that application for you, when we do that screen share, that's part of the conversation we're having with you is here's where we look like you're competitive, here's where you have those gaps, and helping you make those decisions over is the money worth it. But in a general sense, the answer is yes. When it comes to the 320 type rating, here's a couple of things to think about. So the first is, if you have a lot of check ride failures and you want to prove to an airline that you can pass an airline training program, that 320 type could be really valuable. But if you fail that 320 type, guess what you just did? Right? There's a huge risk in that type rating. And this is why we work with folks and we go through what to expect study-wise before they go in. We come up with study plans for them on exactly what to go through. We use a lot of Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane 12 to get them copies of profiles and show them basic attitude instrument stuff before they get into the jet. There's a lot of things that can be done so that before you show up to that training, the poker hand that you're holding has a lot of face cards on it, right? We don't want to send you into that training program full of hopium, hoping you're going to pass the check ride. If you're going to make a decision to go pay for that extra type rating, you want to make damn sure you're going to pass it. Because if you don't, it creates a massive liability for you. So if you have a lot of check ride failures and you're looking to rehabilitate your reputation, prove to the recruiters that you're not a liability, that 320 type rating can be really, really valuable. If you don't have to do it, you got to ask yourself, do you really want to take the risk and spend the extra money? So that's kind of where it fits on that ATP type. In terms of the Federal Trade Commission's non-compete clause on the airline training contracts, I'm more interested in how these training contracts are being structured in terms of tying them to flight time versus a calendar time than I am the FTC. I'm not really concerned about the FTC squashing those right now. Okay, what are the top 3 questions asked at United Delta American interviews for those of us interviewing this summer? Also, do we have to memorize each company's motto, core values before interviewing? Please share your thoughts on translating military soft skills into an airline interview, for instance, leadership, management, communication with large and diverse teams. What factors would I consider when choosing people to be professional references? Would an internal reference from an acquaintance outweigh a reference from someone who knows you better? Okay, so our job at Raven is to make your interview as easy as possible. And there's a couple of things you can do to take control of your interview before you walk in the door. I want everyone to imagine they're going out on a first date with someone, right? Some of you guys may be married, right? Ladies may be married. So maybe been a while since you've gone on a first date, but think a while ago, right? First date. I want you to imagine that person shows up on a first date wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. That's not leaving a good first impression, is it? And you're sitting there going, man, I spent a lot of money on this suit or this dress. I spent a lot of time trying to pick out a really nice restaurant. I tried to be really thoughtful about picking some events we can do to create an experience that we'll both enjoy. And you showed up in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Well, guess what? The airlines are paying for the tickets to fly you in. They're pulling check airmen and senior captains at $300 an hour off the line to interview you. They're rolling out the red carpet when you show up to headquarters, dressed to impress. They are spending time trying to create a really, honestly amazing experience for you so that when you walk out the door, you're feeling like this is the place I want to be. And you show up with messy logbooks, messed up applications with information that's missing, things that are misspelled, right? You didn't follow the instructions. You showed up with sweatpants. Don't do that. Our job is to make sure you show up to that experience looking the part and ready to enjoy the evening. So the resume has to be formatted properly. The content has to be targeted towards their core values. The application has to be filled out the way they want it. And I'm sorry, I hate to break this to you. If you log on to the application and follow their instructions to a T, you've only got it about 40% right. I am sorry that you need companies like us to get hired. It is extremely frustrating even for us because Eileen is the one that sits on the phone with the recruiters for hours a month getting the feedback on how do you want us to put this on the application to make your life as easy as possible. So that when you show up, right, the recruiters go, huh, that was easy. Heads of hiring at the legacy carriers have called her up and said, these people got interviews and got jobs because of how you laid out that application, how you wrote that disclosure. Flat out. If you show up dressed to impress, that interview is a heck of a lot easier than if you show up in sweatpants. But everything has to be targeted towards who they are and what they're about. When we take a look at the top 3 questions, we want the interview to be like a date, not like a check ride, right? A check ride's more of an interrogation. A date is a conversation. So when we take a look at the content on the resume, when we take a look at the content on the application, we're throwing out hooks to grab the recruiter's attention and get conversation started, right? That's why the outside the cockpit stuff matters. so that when they're asking you, tell me about a time questions about, tell me about a time you had a conflict, you can pull from that volunteer experience. It's actually interesting to them that they've been asking you questions about for the past 10 minutes, right? When they give a scenario-based question, you can go, yeah, back to this experience that I had over there at that company or XYZ company. I had something similar to that. Here's how we handled it, right? We want to be able to take those experiences and wrap them into conversations so that when you walk into the interview, it's relaxed. Now, we've all been out on dates before. A date's never completely relaxing, but they're also not check rides. So when we take a look at the top 3 questions, United uses tell me about a time stories to get really to the root of who you are. And specifically, if you take a look at the types of tell me about a time stories that United asks and the types of tell me about a time stories that American asks, they are very high on conflict with coworkers. Now, if you think about this, United and American have stated openly that they are trying to diversify their employee groups. Well, I hate to break this to everybody, but you can't have a diverse employee group of people that look different, that sound different, that think different, that have different life experiences and not have conflict. What they're looking for is people that are willing to come in and share their experiences openly and can work through conflict in a healthy way. Any one of us can disagree about a topic or an idea without being disagreeable. We can walk away from a conversation with a completely different idea on how to solve a problem, but still have respect from each other or for each other when we walk out of there. So when it comes to United, when it comes to American, their tell me about a time questions are where the key are. Now, we have 300 different tell me about a time questions that we use. We do 2 different 1-hour sessions that are one-on-one. The first one is we have you narrow down 6 stories that can be used in any one of the 300 questions that they can ask. And we help you put those into the STAR format so that you go in prepared, right, with a story that can be adjusted on the fly. You don't want to come up with 300 tell me about a time stories. In that second session, we take those 300 questions and we start randomizing them and forcing you to take one of your 6 stories and modify and fit them on the fly into one of those questions. When you do that, you can walk into the interview in a way that there's nothing that they can ask that you're not prepared for, number one, and you don't have to memorize their motto or their core values, and every one of your stories automatically fits into them because we helped you structure them that way before you went in the door. When it boils down to Delta, Delta uses a lot more general HR style questions, right? Tell me about a time you failed as a leader. What do you think makes a good captain? Talk to me about integrity. And then they slide in scenario-based questions. Delta wants you to show them how do you work through that conflict. That's the second part of American's interview. They weave in a lot of those scenario-based questions as well. And the key is they can score whether or not you fit within their core values without asking you to recite the core values. That's the magic on how we do the interview prep with people, is when we're providing the feedback, we're helping you understand, here's how that fits within that company's culture. Because my cat can go on the internet and read the company mottos and memorize them and spit them back out. Probably cat's not a good example. I can get a parakeet to do it though, right? Anybody can memorize words and spit them back out at a recruiter. It's meaningless. You have to show them you know them. And you do that through stories and examples. And so we get the resume and the application squared away to be the foundation of the stories and the examples that you're going to use when you walk in the door. So all of a sudden, it's a very connected experience for the recruiter. There's no surprises. They know what they're walking into. They know what they're getting when you're sitting in front of them. So now if you think about that, how do you translate military soft skills into an interview? It's not just military soft skills. Whether you're at a regional, whether you're a corporate, whether you're in the military, you're thinking about examples that had high amounts of conflict. Now, when I say high amounts of conflict, I don't mean necessarily yelling and screaming at each other. I mean two people that passionately are trying to do the right thing, but they have a different perspective on how to do it. Some of my most intense conflicts have been where both me and the other person were trying to accomplish the same goal, the same mission. We just disagreed on how to get there. And you hammer it out, and you ask them questions, and you listen to what they say before you try and respond. Then you take what they say and you verbalize what you're thinking, and you work it out until you figure it out without having to call management, without having to get mom and dad involved. Think about those stories about the differences in perception, and you're going to unlock the magic of these tell me about a time stories in these interviews. And then what we do is help you pick out your best stories and show you the language, not memorization, but the language on how to demonstrate their core values without ever having to say their core value out loud. If anybody ever watched Pee Wee Herman as a kid, they had the word of the day. Whenever Pee Wee would say the word of the day, everybody would scream. We do that with company core values. We do not let people say the core value in their answers. It comes off cheesy. We make them tell stories. We make them use examples. We make them use problem-solving models that demonstrate the company's core values. So we'll put the core values up in front of you. You can read them all day long. But we're going to show you how to formulate a story to fit within that. Now, what factors would I consider when choosing people to be a professional reference? I will always choose someone that knows me over someone that's internal at a company. Now, here's why. Everybody knows the game. You call up a guy, you sit in the jump seat, you meet a guy out at a pizza place, and you go, will you write me a letter of recommendation? He goes, absolutely, write it for yourself, I'll sign it. It's meaningless. HR is onto the game. And Eileen may want to step in here in a little bit. She talks to the heads of hiring and recruiters all the time about this, and they say the same thing over and over and over. I want somebody that flew with you. I want somebody that knows who you are. I add a different level to that. I don't just want people that were superiors of mine. I want people that were peers, and I want people that were subordinates. I want the recruiter to get a 360-degree perspective of who I am. I want them to see what it's like to manage and lead me. I want to see what it's like to be managed and led by me. And I want them to see what it's like to work alongside with me. Some of my best letters of recommendation are from flight students that were struggling. Some of my best letters of recommendation are from flight attendants I've worked with. Some of my best letters of recommendation are from other FOs that were in new hire training with me who were struggling. Those are people that can tell stories about me in the letter of recommendation that when the recruiter reads that, they go, I understand how you fit within our core values. I do not ever, ever, ever write my own letter of recommendation. If the other person is not willing to write the letter of recommendation for me, I don't want it. But I do create a one sheet for them to make writing it easy. Here's a paragraph about where we met and how you know me. Here's the amount of times we flew together over what period of time. Here are some memory joggers of problems or projects we worked on together. I give them a one sheet. Here's the companies that I'm applying to. Here are their core values. I want to make writing the letter of recommendation as easy as possible for the other person to do it for me, but I'm not going to do it for them because I'm not really good at talking about myself. And I'm going to miss the magic of what makes me me that they're going to catch. And if I write 3 letters of recommendation for myself, the recruiters are going to see it in the writing style. So if you notice, the core values starts with the resume, woven into the application, continues into the stories, tied together with the references and letters of recommendation. This is why we spend so much one-on-one time with our clients. We are trying to understand you from a 360-degree perspective because it's the only way we can help you compete. It's tough out there right now. And people like us are spending 10, 15, 20 hours per client making them compete. If you think you're going to show up on your own, by the way, we are talking to the recruiters. We're looking at the hundreds of applications. If you think you're going to compete against somebody like that, it's not a fair fight. But it comes from 15 years of watching what works and what doesn't work and being thoughtful and being invested in learning who you are. That's the reason why when you go to our website, there are no service prices listed. You can't buy anything on our website. You have to get on the phone with somebody on my team to talk to you first. We need to understand what are the problems that you're facing. We need to understand, can we even solve them? Because if we can't solve them, we're going to tell you. We're very honest. But then lastly, we have to agree on a plan on how are we going to get you there. You have to have a strategy in place before you start attacking this problem. Right? Before you take off in an airplane, you run takeoff performance, you run an analysis on the threats and the risks, you do briefings. It's the same thing here. You get prepped before you fly. You don't just hop in the airplane, go out on the runway, push full power, and hope it's all going to work itself out. All right, background questions. 60% of the pilots that are putting in applications have something in their background. So over half of you have something in your background right now. Now, that could be something minor from a check ride failure on your private. Could be something major to, we got a guy hired by Delta who crashed 2 jets in 18 months. I don't say that to brag. I say that to show you what's possible if you have a strategy and you do it right. And you cannot lie about it. If you lie when they catch you, it's over. And believe me, I know every way they can catch you. Because whenever you see somebody on the news, whenever you see somebody that gets fired, I'm the guy that gets the phone call. And so guess what? That thing that got expunged from your record, you know, the one that your attorney said nobody will ever find? Well, guess what? When they run that FBI fingerprint check, there's a record of the arrest. When you go, hey, I resigned from that company, but there's no paperwork anywhere, and somebody at that company doesn't like you, and they send a letter to your chief pilot, they could terminate you. And these are real life stories of things that we've had happen where someone called us after and said, hey, look, man, somebody found out. So you had an incident while you were a student pilot and had 2 check ride failures. I now have a commercial pilot with 600 hours total time. Would anyone hire me? Yes. But anybody that has a background issue is in what we call reputation rehabilitation. Okay? I did an informal poll before we started here. I have verified with 100% accuracy that we are all human beings, which means we all make mistakes. I hate to break it to you, all the recruiters are human beings as well, and they make mistakes. I had a guy go into an interview, Southwest, if I remember correctly. Guy had a DUI in his background. The recruiter hammered him on the DUI. Hammered him for about 10, 15 minutes. At the end of it, the recruiter turned and said, hey man, I just want to thank you for being honest. I really appreciate it. I had a DUI myself. I just needed to see where you're at on it, if you were taking responsibility or not. Recruiters are human beings. They fail check rides. They get DUIs. They get terminated. What they do not tolerate is lying. So when you have a check ride failure, that's where we start looking at how long ago was the check ride failure? What was the check ride failure for? When somebody comes to us and they have a background issue, we write the explanation for you. We physically write the explanation and put it on the application for you. And this is really important because we understand the psychology of what the recruiters are looking for, having had conversations with them. You can't just write on there, I failed my private pilot, or I failed my insurance pilot, or I failed my ATP. They've got to know what you failed. They've got to know why you failed it. They've got to know, based on how you write this, do you actually understand why you failed? And Some people will write it in terms of what did you learn, but it's really how do I as a recruiter know this isn't going to be a problem for me moving forward, right? The recruiter is going to drop, or the company the recruiter works for is going to drop 40, 50, 60, $70,000 on you in training. They'd like to know if that's going to pay off. So when you're thinking about writing up a background issue, check ride failure, termination, DUI, arrest, accident, incident, which by the way, when we work with all of our clients, we sign a confidentiality agreement with everybody. And we do that because we want you guys to feel comfortable being honest with us, knowing that we are legally bound to not share that information with anybody other than you. Not going to tell a recruiter, not going to tell your buddy. It's not going anywhere, right? But we need you to be honest with us. We need you to share the paperwork with us. I can't tell you how many times we get on with folks' attorneys to make sure we fully understand the situation so that when we write it up, we can tell a story that makes sense to that recruiter. And it's different if you have multiple issues in your background versus one issue in your background. Having 5 check ride failures is different than 1 check ride failure. Having 5 check ride failures where you busted steep turns 3 times for being 20 feet off your altitude is very different than busting 5 check ride failures for decision making. Right? We've got to find out what those themes are, and we have to address it in a way that at the end, when the recruiter reads it, they go, this person is not a liability for my company. That's the key to dealing with background issues. Now, when it comes to the top 3 or 5 mistakes folks are making who attempt to move to 121, honestly, the mistakes are the same, whether you're a 135 captain, a 135 first officer, a military pilot, a CFI. I am a big proponent of LinkedIn, right? Because I can go onto LinkedIn, I can go to United Airlines company page, and there's a search box. I can type in first officer and I can find all the new hires there. I can do the same thing for SkyWest. I could do the same thing for Republic. I could do the same thing for NetJets. I can do the same thing for FlexJet, right? And so when I go there, I can find these people and I can ask, can you send me any documentation over what the training footprint looks like? Can you help me understand what can I study ahead of time? Can you help me understand what were the sections that people failed? The more intelligence you can gather about what you're getting into before you walk in the door, the better you'll be, because most people don't have a study habit that they need to pass the training. And that's really what's killing people. You'd be surprised how many times folks fail training. Sorry, how many times folks are asked to resign during training and never failed the check ride? They just weren't progressing fast enough and the sim instructor refused to sign them off. If you find yourself in that situation where something's going weird, you're not getting along with your sim partner, you're having trouble with your instructor, you don't think you're progressing the way you should, please schedule time on our calendar. I will set up a coaching session with you one-on-one, and I will help you figure it out. I will tell you the questions to ask the instructor. I will give you techniques. Please call us. It is much more enjoyable for us to help you fix it before you get let go than to help you fix it after. Dude, it breaks my heart when somebody gets dropped out of training and afterwards I explain to them why it didn't work. I would much rather see you be successful than help you have to figure out how to rehabilitate yourself afterwards. We're good at it either way. But the reason why I say this is most people don't realize the resources available. If you need the help, reach out. I am a former FAA inspector. I've sat in the jump seats of every place any of you guys want to work. I've flown there myself. I've been through the training programs. I am an instructor myself. Flight instructor for private and whatever students, but I teach people how to certify ILS and VOR approaches. I shoot 76 ILSs per week, and I have books about that thick memorized on useless information that none of you will ever want to know. But what that means is I have a lot of different techniques because I've been through a lot of different training programs. I've certified a lot of different training programs. I've been through a lot of different training programs myself, right? And I've had the opportunity to teach a lot of different people in different training programs. We have a lot of tricks. Please call us if you need the help. Okay, so here's the QR code. This is going to take you to my LinkedIn profile. If you connect with me, you are automatically going to have a boatload of recruiters in your sphere of influence immediately, because LinkedIn will start making recommendations for you to connect with them. Number one. Number two, if you guys like the information that you received today, I post 6 days a week on LinkedIn answering questions that you guys ask me. Sometimes I do it via video, sometimes I do it in writing, sometimes I do a handout, right? Okay, but I put those posts up 6 days a week so you guys can comment and be seen by a recruiter. I'm trying to make it easier for you to connect with recruiters and get conversations started. Here's one right here. I hid the person's name, but I was talking about some of the Boeing and Airbus stuff. And if you see this second piece down here, the recruiter is talking about how much difficulty they're having figuring out the golden zone of a ratio of aircraft to pilots. Scan that link, connect to me on LinkedIn, and leverage the crap out of my network to get yourself opportunities that other people aren't. Every single recruiter for every possible company you could ever want to work for, legacy airline all the way down to CFI jobs, is on LinkedIn. Get on there, connect, and start talking to these people. Okay, we put out a newsletter. It comes out every Saturday at 8 p.m. I told you earlier about the FACA one. Here is the Raven one. It's aviation news and insights takes no longer than 5 minutes. Okay, what I am doing is I am taking a look at what people are engaging with me on LinkedIn. I'm taking a look at questions people are asking on Facebook. I'm having conversations with Eileen about what she's talking to the recruiters about, what they're complaining about, what they're asking questions about, right? And we're taking that, we're putting that into an industry analysis newsletter that comes out once a week. There's no sales language in there. You don't have to buy anything. It's just analysis. And it's the conversations that we're seeing happening that you need to know about. Here is the QR code if you would like to sign up for that newsletter. Also, if you have a buddy, send them the QR code. It's free information, very similar to what we're doing here today. It is purely designed to give you a competitive advantage, nothing else. I want you to be informed in the decisions that you're making. Okay, look, hopefully I've made it clear. You need a strategist to help you define this path. Otherwise, you are going to spend a lot of time, you're going to spend a lot of effort, you're going to spend a lot of energy, you're going to spend a lot of money, and it's not going to pay off. Our objective is to draw a straight line between where you're at and where you want to go, and to make it as financially cheap as possible. You should never spend money unless you understand how it draws a straight line between where you're at to where you want to go. That's why you cannot go to our website and purchase anything. We have no interest in charging someone money or taking money from someone if it's not going to solve a problem. It's why you're going to get on a one-on-one conversation with likely Eileen, and we're going to ask you a boatload of questions, because it is critically important to us that we understand who you are and what you have going on before we make any decision on when and how we can help you. Now, if you need to talk to someone, I'm going to pop up a QR code here in about 30 seconds. It is a free 45-minute one-on-one consultation. You are going to gain perspective on where you stand. We are in very high demand right now. We are asking people, look, if you have something that is urgent, if you're submitting resumes and you're submitting applications and you're not getting calls, if you have a conference coming up and your resume is garbage and you don't know what to do with it, right? If you have an interview coming up and you need help with your introduction, or your tell me about a time stories, or why do you want to work here? If you need help with technical prep, if you've already purchased prep and you want a mock interview to get a second set of eyes, we're asking you to save those slots for those people that need that, right? We are trying to help people right now because of the speed that things are moving at and the speed that things are changing, by talking to them on the phone, helping them understand what the strategy. If there's resources available that are free, we want to direct you in that direction. If there's something we can do to help, then we would like to lay out a plan to help. If you would like to talk to us, here is the QR code to schedule. Like I said, we are in high demand right now. It is probably, Eileen, is it about 2 weeks out, I think, right now?
Yeah,
it's about 2 weeks out. We're going to ask you some questions, contact information. There will be a calendar link so you can schedule a time, but there's going to be a text box that you can use to give us information. The more detailed the information you give us about who you are and what your problem is, the better prepared we can be when we get on the phone with you with resources. We want to make sure you get to where you want to go, shortest path possible, cheapest and easiest. That is what I have. I appreciate everyone letting me go 17 minutes over on the 1 hour that I promised. We are going to schedule these on a monthly basis. I very, very, very much appreciate you guys taking the time to write in your questions. It helps me get my finger on the pulse of what's impacting you guys and try and put together the information in a logical format. I hope you found the information valuable. If you have things that you would like to see that we can do better, shoot a message in. Like I said, I take the feedback. On that note, I'm going to turn it over to Eileen, see if she has anything, and then I'm going to release you guys to enjoy your Thursday evening.
Not at all. I can't add too much to that. I really hope to be speaking with some of you as soon as you're ready to talk with me. Have a great evening, everybody.
Have a good evening, everybody. Please scan the QR code if you need to talk. We appreciate you joining the newsletter, and I look forward to catching you guys on LinkedIn. Talk soon.
We'll be chopping up the recordings and put it out. Everybody's asking. Don't worry, you'll see them on James's LinkedIn page, so make sure to be following him for the recordings.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.